I was listening to the show Radio Lab, and they had done an episode on Matt Bai's book about Gary Hart. And when I listened to it, I just couldn't imagine that there was a moment in our history when the presumed next president of the United States was in a dark alleyway in the middle of the night with 3 reporters, and no one knew what to do because no one had been in that situation before.
I did have much the same thought. It goes back a long way. I mean, I met Gary Hart when I was writing for the New York Times Magazine. He was a pretty new writer there in 2002. I wrote a piece which repeated, quite honestly, a lot of the sort of tropes and misperceptions about the scandal. I'm not proud of that. I wasn't proud of it at the time. It was a fine piece, but it didn't delve deeply enough, and I thought about it for years afterward. It kind of stayed with me. I thought Hart had been incredibly impressive. I was watching, as Jay was from the other side as a political operative, what it was to cover presidential campaigns in the modern era and how the system was sort of broken. And I began to feel there was a connection that needed to be explored. And I went back and did this book on Gary Hart and explored a lot of those themes. And that's what Jason saw very much the same way. And Jay and I had been working together, and the 3 of us came together and had this vision for what the movie could be.
Jason Reitman was the first thing I heard. The script is coming that Jason is going to direct. And as an actor, you read things with a certain framework when you get to page 1, and my framework the entire time was, please love this, because I'm a massive fan of Jason. So
if this sucks, I don't want to have to say no?
I was going to say yes anyway, basically. It just so happened, I was on a gap year in 1987 when all this happened. I was turning 19 and probably drunk most of the year. I remember very little of it, if anything. So I really, as an outsider, as an Aussie, I took to the story very fresh, and I found it very somehow relevant. And weirdly, sort of, someone who loves puzzles, there was a piece of the puzzle that I never knew about, but somehow made sense a little bit of what was happening today. I'm also a journalism major, so I was very interested in that. And so, story, director, story, I'm in.
I do know that one of the reasons we were so excited about this was because it was a way to engage with the questions that I think were many questions we're asking ourselves about today without having the divisiveness of having to be talking about something that's happening right now, and sort of having a bit of space to be able to look at it from with some perspective and say, oh, it's really interesting that it's so different now, but what does this mean for how we think of men in power? What does it mean for the women who work for or with him? What does it mean for all of these different things? And being able to ask those questions and engage in those ideas in a way that felt more comfortable and more easy to have those conversations that still are very relevant to what we should be thinking about today.
The Frontrunner is a movie that is also very interested in the emotional burden that is put on women during a scandal. Whether it's Donna Rice, a young, bright, aspirational woman who had her life just stolen from her, it was just kind of ripped out of her hands, or whether you were one young woman working at the Washington Post, or one young woman working on a campaign, and are forced to speak for your entire gender. I mean, this is a conversation that Helen and I got into all the time while making this film, and it would get heated in the best way.
And it was something I loved about, I love Molly Ephraim as Irene Kelly is one of my favorite characters, because I think that that's something that you don't see a lot. And when you're talking about these various things or things that happen, are all of the women who have to do all of this work that's sort of not expected of men often.
I spent some time with Gary and his family before filming. Obviously, out of respect, I've never played someone who is alive. I played real people who...
Wolverine is real.
I'm sorry, apart from Wolverine. It's a secret. I told you backstage, George. And of course, out of respect for him, but also in terms of the process, what was most important to me was every single person. I spoke to many people before I met Gary, and almost every one of them, the only thing in common was this word enigma. And how smart, he's one of the best politicians of the past 50 years, many things. But I wanted to sit there and be with him to understand what it is like to be around that sort of mysterious, enigmatic quality. And I saw that. There were so many parts of him. He's as sharp, I imagine, as he's ever been. You probably could speak to that, Matt. very interested, very knowledgeable on any subject of what's going on today, and I have actual great respect for him, and we have, I would say, an affection and friendship. I'm not going to tell you exactly what it was, but at one point he shared with me his 100-day plan if he had made it into office, and I can categorically tell you it would be probably a very different world today if that had happened.
In a weird way, 2016 didn't surprise either of us, and you know, didn't surprise a lot of us on this stage. But we were telling a story of a system that we felt was broken from the inside for a long time. 16 was just, you know, more broken, maybe more quickly than we thought it would be.
And it raises, I guess, a question that we're all interested in, and that is, whoever we're going to elect is going to be a human being, and a human being is going to have flaws. And we need to ask ourselves at all times, what kind of flaws do we want in that person? I endorse him immediately. I do too. I'm down.
100%.
I will make signs.
I will work for you.
Someone start the pins.
Yeah,
Just don't rule it out, Hugh. Whatever you do, don't. No categorical statements here.
Yes. No, the opposite. That's a good question. Literally, there was no particular aspiration to run for politics after looking into the world. It makes me want to run even further. I think it's a very, very... And one thing I love about the film is this cauldron of a campaign, as the movie sees it not just from the candidate's point of view, but from the volunteers, from the press, from the family. Decisions, really important decisions, are being made on the fly under immense pressure. And, you know, I think, plus now, as Matt says so brilliantly in his book, post-Watergate, every single journalist, every voter is assuming there's a flaw that needs to be found out. So I'm going to find out the flaw. Thank God as an actor we don't have that standard because there wouldn't be any actors left. And I don't know if I can handle it, to be honest. Too thin-skinned, I think.
But you know, New York has a history of senators who come from other places, and the great thing about an Australian is you haven't voted on anything. You know, you have no record to attack.
Think about his appeal in Erie County.
I think there's something to be done.
I don't know about you guys. I believe everything's fixable because I'm an optimist. But, they're laughing at me, yeah. See, that's the optimist actor and why I probably should never go into politics. But
no, I'm with you, Hugh, but I also really would vote for you. So.
Oh, thank you. I love the line, I was just thinking about it this morning, that my character has, that he believes in the sanctity of the process. And I think one thing I love about the film is it sort of reminds us that, yes, it's broken. And by the way, I'm saying that as an Australian. I think we've just elected our 6th Prime Minister in the last 7 years or something. So however, it's definitely a process. The democratic process is something worth fighting for, I would say. There's not a country on the planet, a democratic country, where the people of that country wouldn't want to change something of that process. But what I love about the movie is I think people are arguing about which parts of the process do we keep, which parts are worth fighting for, what is important, what is not.
I also think it's, you know, the story's bigger than do we care about people's sex lives or not about their sex lives. In a sense, you know, the question is, what things matter in a candidacy? Can we focus on things that matter? Do we assume that everyone do we as journalists, myself, having covered 5 presidential campaigns, do we assume that everybody's lying, everybody's fraudulent, and it's our job to find out how? Or do we endeavor to sort of provide the context that character requires? What have they been for their whole lives, their whole careers? How have they voted? Have they been corrupt? Have they been honest with constituents in addition to being honest with their wife, right? I mean, what is the measure of someone's integrity in that context? I think those are questions we still wrestle with, particularly in a news cycle that goes so fast.
This is a deeply human movie. We show people, not the people that are involved in politics are human beings trying to make difficult decisions every single day, and we tried to show that. There are no black hats or white hats in our story. There's a lot of gray because a guy in one scene makes the right decision, and the next scene makes the wrong decision. That's just life.
It has been truly incredible, and honestly, and this is not just a lazy segue, but to think of having Logan and that movie, but all the while working on a Jason Reitman film about an issue which I think is very relevant and a movie I'm extremely proud of. I certainly am at a point in my career that I pinch myself, and I feel very, very blessed.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys! Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.